If anybody has any prayer requests, put it in the comment section and I'll pray over it. This message is the Crucifixion Bible Study 2025. It's part of a series on the crucifixion, the burial and resurrection, the 40 days and ascension, the day of Pentecost, and the second return of Christ, which the plan is to get the death, burial, and resurrection done before Good Friday and Resurrection Day. And this one's on the crucifixion. I'm going to start with a story that I'd heard. Once upon a mountaintop, 3 little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. The first tree looked at the stars, thinking like diamonds above him, and said, "Someday I hope to be a treasure chest people could fill with gold and silver and precious gems. They could decorate me with intricate carvings, and everyone would see its beauty, and I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world." The second tree looked out at the small stream trickling by the way of the ocean and said, "Someday I will be a mighty ship. I will take kings and queens across the seas and sail to unknown places everywhere. Unknown places everyone will feel safe because of the strength of my hull. I will be the strongest ship in the world." Finally, the third tree looked up in the valley below where busy men and busy women worked in a busy town and said, "I want to grow to be the tallest and the straightest tree in the forest. People will see me on top of a hill and raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world." Years passed. The rain came and the sun shone. And the little trees grew tall. And one day 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This looks like a strong tree. I can sell the wood to a carpenter." After being cut down, the tree was happy because he knew that the carpenter would make him into a treasure chest. The second woodcutter looked at the second tree. The woodsman said, "This looks like a strong tree. I can sell it to a shipyard." The second tree was happy because he knew he was on the way to become a mighty ship. When the woodsman came upon the third tree, the tree was frightened because he knew if they cut him down, his dreams would never come true. The woodsman said, "I don't need anything special from this tree. I'll just take it back with me." When the first tree arrived at the carpenter, they made it into a feed box for animals. It was then placed in a barn and filled with hay. They cut the second tree and made a small fishing boat. They cut the third tree into large beams and left them alone in a lumber yard. The years went by, and the three trees nearly forgot their dreams. Then one day, a man and a woman came to the barn. She gave birth and placed the baby in the feed box made from the first tree. As the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood, the tree could feel the importance of the event. Now the tree knew it was holding the greatest treasure of all time. Years later, a group of men got into the fishing boat made from the second tree. One man went to sleep. A great storm arose, and the tree didn't think it was strong enough to keep these men safe. The other men woke up the man who was sleeping. He stood and said, "Peace, be still." And the storm stopped as quickly as it had begun. And suddenly the tree knew it was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when its beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. It flinched as it was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. It shuddered when they nailed the man's hands to it. The tree never wanted to be used for such a cruel purpose. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, and the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the third tree strong, and every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. And that was better than being the tallest tree in the world. All three trees got what they wanted, just not in the way they wanted it. The moral of the story: we all have dreams and plans. When surrendered to God, they may turn out very different from what we imagine. But God has a plan for each of us, and He loves us deeply. Even when things are not going our way, know that God will never leave us nor forsake us. In the long run, God's will is the better way. There's a video where a man portraying Simon, the one that carried the cross, and it has a powerful story that this man that portrayed Simon told. I will put that in the comment section. I will also put two other videos in the comment section of two songs: His Life for Mine and The Loneliest Walk in History. John chapter 18. Starting at verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, He went forth with His disciples over the brook Cedron, where was a garden, into the which He entered, and His disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed Him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted thither with His disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus therefore, knowing all things that should come upon Him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seek ye? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus says unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. As soon as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backwards and fell to the ground. Then asked he them again, Whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke of them. Which thou gavest me, have I lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Jesus unto Peter, Put up thy sword into its sheath. The cup which my Father has given me, shall I not drink it? Then the band and the captain and the officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him, and led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was high priest that same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it should be expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spoke unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Then the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He says, I am not. And the servants and officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, and it was cold, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whether the Jews always resort. And in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. I'm going to pause for right there for a minute. I'm wondering what they was asking him about. Was it about his parables? Because I know they couldn't understand his parables. Was that what they was asking him to explain? Verse 22. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me? Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said, therefore unto him, Art not thou also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not one of the servants of the... He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, says, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Peter then denied it again, and immediately the cock crew. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment. And it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. I'm going to pause right there for a minute. What it was, there was a teaching among Jews. They could not go into a place that had idols in it. And a lot of times they wouldn't even go into a house of any Gentile because they was afraid they might have idols. So if they had to speak with a Gentile, the Gentile had to come out to them because they could not go into the building with the idols. Verse 29. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. See, that's how they answer him when he asked them for his, if he had any accusation against him. They say, well, if he's not a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him here. I mean, they didn't accuse him of anything, really, when they said that. Verse 31. Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying what death he should die. I think what that was saying there, they weren't allowed to crucify anybody. They was allowed to stone them, but they couldn't crucify them because that was too extreme for them, which the Romans, they were brutal people. And so they was all right with crucifying somebody. Verse 33. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered him, saying, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priest has delivered thee unto me. And what hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight that I should not be delivered to the Jews? But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. Jesus was also sent to Herod. Herod questioned Jesus, and Jesus did not answer. Herod mocked him and sent him back to Pilate. This can be found in Luke chapter 23, verse 6 through 12. Back to John. John 18, verse 38. Pilate says unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all. But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Then cried they all again, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber, which you read the other Gospels, you will also find out Barabbas was also a murderer. Then Pilate therefore took Jesus, this is on into chapter 19. Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. That is where they beat him with a whip. And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again and said unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. By the way, I'm going to pause right there for a minute. What Pilate was doing when he had Jesus flogged, he was trying to inflict as much punishment on him as he could, hoping that they would decide to release him, which they didn't. Verse 5. Then came Jesus forth wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate says unto them, Behold the man. When the chief priests therefore and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate says unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, we have a law, and by our law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and says unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then says Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have the power to crucify thee, and have the power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee has the greater sin. Okay, so here Pilate was trying to release Jesus. And he tells him, Don't you realize I could release you or crucify you? The thing is, Jesus is basically telling him right here, he has to crucify him. That's the only way that the scriptures can be fulfilled. That is the only way that we can be saved, is through what Jesus did on the cross. Verse 12. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat, in a place that is called the pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he says unto the Jews, Behold your king. But they cried out, Away with him, away with him, crucify him. Pilate says unto them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. I want to pause right there for a minute. Pilate, if you look at what history says about him, he didn't like the Jews. In fact, even right here, Pilate is mocking them. He's mocking them and saying, You won't kill your own king? That's why he said that. Then delivered he him therefore unto them to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. And he bearing the cross went forth into a place called the place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and 2 other with him on either side. And Jesus in the midst, and Pilate wore a title. Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross. And the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. This title, when read, many of the Jews, for the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh to the city. And it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, which was the three languages that people spoke in that part of the world. Then said the chief priests of the Jews to Pilate, Write not the King of the Jews, but that he says, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, I have written what I have written. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam, woven from the top throughout. They said therefore among themselves, Let us not rend it, but cast lots for it, whose it shall be, that the scripture might be fulfilled, which says, They parted my remnant among them, and for my vesture they did cast lots. These things therefore the soldiers did. Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, he says unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then says he to his disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour that disciple took her unto his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, I thirst. I'm going to pause right there for a minute. On the 3rd hour, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. On the 9th hour, he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Both of those can be found in Matthew 27. The 2 thieves that were crucified beside of Jesus. One mocked him and the other rebuked the one that was mocking him, and asked Jesus to remember him into his kingdom. Jesus said, Today you shall be with me in paradise. That can be found in Luke 23, verse 43. Back to John. Chapter 19, verse 29. Now there was set a vessel full of vinegar, and they filled the sponge with vinegar, and put it upon hyssop, and put it to his mouth. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, It is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. In other words, he died at that point. The Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. Then came the soldiers and broke the legs of the first and of the other which was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they broke not his legs. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. I want to pause right there for a minute. There are many who claim that Jesus did not die on the cross. They claim that he just passed out. But what the soldier was doing right there when he stabbed Jesus with a spear, he made sure that he was dead. Jesus was dead at this point. Verse 35. And he that saw it bare record, and his record is true. And he knoweth that he says true, that ye might believe. John, notice how he keeps writing where he'll say, he that bear record. Or he never specifies that it was him it was talking about. Like he also called himself the disciple whom Jesus loved. But he's talking about himself there. For these things were done that the scripture should be fulfilled. A bone of him shall not be broken. And again another scripture said, they shall look on him whom they pierced. With that, have a Jesus-filled week. And if it be the good Lord's will, I'll be back on here Monday evening with the Bible study on the burial and resurrection of Jesus.